The draft is done. The rosters will soon be locked. Let's get into it right now on the channel and let's talk the draft day night two. Lots of picks happened this time. There was picks after Raw as well, but we'll start round one. Raw selected Imperium, which now consists of only Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser. Am I surprised by? I don't know. Gunther's had such a great run on Raw. Granted, it's not a world championship. He had obviously the Intercontinental title. We've done a lot of things there. Took that title and made it prestigious again. Made it mean something. Hasn't gone for the world championship yet. So perhaps Gunther this year will be focusing on the world championship. Ludwig Kaiser will obviously be behind his side still. They kicked out Giovanni Vinci last week, so it seemed anyway. And the draft will kind of give you more of an idea on that. Ludwig's a great wrestler as well. There's no question that. Could he be going for some gold this year? Silverware, it's like he's going playing football. Would he be going for some gold this year? More than capable, absolutely more than capable. So Raw redrafts, or should we say reselects, Imperium. Much like SmackDown's first pick of night one, they reselected Jade Cargill. Not a major surprise, I don't think. Jade Cargill's only just come up. She just kind of aligned with the Blue brand, although Braun Breaker had aligned with the Blue brand and then got transferred. So interesting with that one. Jade Cargill she's a star in the making. It's just whether she can make it, especially in the WWE. In their world is a lot different to the world that she come from. But it'd be interesting with her to see how she gets on SmackDown. Now she's got the permanent home. She's tagging with Bianca currently and Naomi in a way. So will she move away from that? Will she focus on championships? The tag team championship's a possibility, although I'm not sure how that works. Now we'll have to get into that in a minute. But nevertheless, Jade Cargill on SmackDown. We will see what the future holds for her. The first time in round one, or the first pick of the night, that where a team moved or a wrestler moved from one brand to the other was Raw. They selected Damage Control. Obviously, Asuka, Kairi Sane, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky are now on the Raw brand. That's a good move. I think that is a really positive move for Damage Control. They'd kind of done it all on SmackDown as it was. Nothing really left for them. Obviously, Io's no longer the world champion. The tag team champions, though, are still there, the Kabuki Warriors. So they will still be in gold, but on the Raw brand. And it gives that Raw side to freshen up a little bit of the, we haven't seen Damage Control on Raw, certainly consistently. I think we did in spurts over the last year, but having them on Raw together now is going to be a bigger move and a better move, I personally think, for Raw. So a good switch in that one, in my opinion. They ended round one with SmackDown reselecting Kevin Owens. Kind of makes sense at the moment. He's once again embroiled in bloodline matters, obviously with a new partner in Randy Orton. So, yeah, can understand that one. That one makes perfect sense considering the bloodline are still on SmackDown, as is Randy Orton. So, perfect sense for that. What happens to Kevin Owens after this? I don't know. He's always been, I always say, he's always a good hand, always someone to have around. Great worker, can do good as a face or a heel, works. So, yeah, good pick for SmackDown. Couldn't really see him back on Raw, to be honest with you. I think, that to be on SmackDown for another year or however long it takes is a good move. Round two, the first pick from Raw was CM Punk. One of them ones that was still one of the big names that still hadn't been drafted was Punk. Interestingly, it was only round two. And again, this is kind of where, and you know that it's scripted, but this is kind of where you're thinking, like, why wouldn't SmackDown have drafted him? Why wouldn't he have been one of the first picks on SmackDown? Again, I know, we all know that it's scripted, but it's still a valid point that you'd look on a draft pool and you'd say, CM Punk's eligible. Why am I not picking him? Yeah, no disrespect to Kevin Owens, but if I'm SmackDown, why aren't I picking him at the end of the first round? Doesn't, nitpicking maybe, but I think you can all get my point on that. Punk to Raw makes sense. The reasons why will be given to you a bit later on. He was on Raw himself as well with Drew McIntyre, having a scathing promo battle. They're both injured at the moment, which is making the thing quite more funny that they're both injured, but they're both cutting promos on each other. Would be looking forward to that feud, assuming McIntyre is on Raw, which we'll get to in a little while. But CM Punk on Raw, fine. Let's see what happens. But you do have to question why SmackDown wouldn't have picked him up at the. It is what it is. SmackDown reselected the Pride, Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits next as their first pick of round 2. Yeah, I kind of get it. You know, Lashley probably they haven't quite got going as a group for one reason or another. It just hasn't quite worked. I'm not sure why. Maybe they just haven't had the investment because of the bloodline on SmackDown. I don't think it gets maybe the attention that it needs, and they're kind of just embroiled in. There was embroiled with Karrion Kross and their group, the Final Testament. But I don't think it gets perhaps the attention that it deserves because of the bloodlines on there as well. And it's like, at what point do they cross paths? You know, because they're technically well, there's only 2 at the moment in the bloodline, active wrestlers. Jimmy's out injured. Jacob Fatu hasn't yet to debut yet, but eventually you should get that crossover between them that I'm actually really looking forward to. It should be a really good Solo and Lashley, potentially Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga versus the Street Profits. Really good options there. So the Pride on SmackDown, I can live with that. I can go with that for sure. Raw at this point selected someone who was out injured. He did return on Raw this past week. The monster of all monsters, Braun Strowman, is back, and he's back on the Raw brand. Yeah, again, with his injury, it makes perfect sense that Strowman is back on Raw. He's been out for a very, very long time. It's good to see him back doing what he does best and just going crazy. Logan Paul nearly got on the wrong side of him, which would have been great. I would have loved him to have done something like but he didn't. He did choke slam. I can't remember who he choke slammed. He did choke slam someone on Raw. Finn Balor was the man he choke slammed on Raw, for that matter. But good to see Strowman back. Let's see what happens with him as we go on to Raw. Yeah, there's names there you could already throw out. That would be good. But yeah, Strowman, good to see him back. Yeah, Raw's fine for a selection. SmackDown reselected Tiffany Stratton to complete round 2. Yeah, again, one I can understand. She had already not long been drafted over there. She's embroiled already in the women's championship picture. So it makes total sense for Tiffany to stay over on there. The interesting bit is that she is dating Ludwig Kaiser, who is on Raw. That was one of the interesting ones. I thought perhaps Ludwig would have come over, maybe with Gunther to SmackDown, because they do have a tendency to keep couples together, but just not in this sense, and not right now. Tiffany Stratton, part of the blue brand going forward, and again, very, very understandable pick. Getting to near enough to halfway, round 3. Now, this is another one where we have got movers finally. So they're starting to move people around. The LWO, so the Rey Mysterio's group. I think I'm sure Carlito was in that, actually. I'll have to take a quick look, to be fair. Yeah, Carlito was a part of it. So Mysterio, Cruz del Toro, Joaquin Wilde, Selena Vega, Dragon Lee, and Carlito are all a part of Raw. So that's 5 or 6 names there. So Raw have got a fresher roster with 5 new names. And interestingly enough, Dominic Mysterio and Rey Mysterio are back on the same show. Carlito, I'm not so sure there, because there was that issue on SmackDown last week where he was shown to be the man that beat up Dragon Lee, because he thought he was going to get in the WrestleMania match, when instead Ray went out and got Andrade, who is now on SmackDown. So they freshened it up. 5 or 6 new talents there. Selena for the women's division as well. Let's not forget that. Interesting to see what happens with the LWO. Do they go into a feud with, say, Judgment Day now? I know Rhea's out injured, but Judgment Day are still there. Is that where they start off with Dominic's brand? With Dominic's, Ray's got a chance now to get even more revenge on Judgment Day with Dominic Mysterio. So that kind of meant the LWO was in a feud on SmackDown with Liga del Fantasma, Would that change? And the answer is yes, because SmackDown re-kept Liga del Fantasma. So that's interesting. Santos Escobar, Humberto Carrero, Angel Garza, and Electra Lopez are all with the blue brand. Yeah, that's going to be interesting now because they've just kind of been embroiled with the LWO for as long as I can remember. So it's now their opportunity. Where do they go? I mean, you got Andrade on SmackDown as well. Do they try to recruit Andrade in? Does he go against them? Does he form a group himself? It's it's an interesting one there. With I would have thought they would have been on the same show, but they wasn't. They stuck together. They separated these two teams now, and it creates a bit more intrigue as to what they do with these two teams going forward. Next pick, Raw reselected Drew McIntyre. Now, again, we know we keep going back. We know this is scripted and storyline. If that had been me and I had free reign of this, if I was SmackDown, I would have picked him in round two. I would have had him right underneath CM Punk. So they could. So basically, they couldn't. Maybe even couldn't touch gloves until the Royal Rumble next year, or maybe even go as far as they have a WrestleMania match eventually next year. But for me, that's how I would have done it. I would have moved McIntyre. McIntyre re-signed the contract to Raw, re-signed the contract with WWE. Sorry, another 3 more years. He's on the Raw brand going forward. He's in with CM Punk, so that does make sense. It's just surprising how far down the pecking order McIntyre actually was. Middle of round three to be selected. Someone who's been a mainstay of the WWE. Took him through the pandemic era. World champion for about 5 minutes at WrestleMania, and he's now down right at the bottom, really, of the picks of the round three. But interesting. And obviously still on the same brand as Punk, so they will eventually get in there. SmackDown now selected someone from Raw, finally. That being Shinsuke Nakamura is now a part of the SmackDown brand. Yeah, I get that one. Nakamura, criminally underused in WWE, absolutely criminally underused. Will the move to SmackDown help? Well, I don't know, is the answer to that. But you can reignite his feud with Cody. There's options there for Nakamura on SmackDown, and again, it kind of like I think he's been a big wasted opportunity in a WWE. I don't think they really gave him the opportunity they could have given. They could have given him, really. I don't know why that reason is. They just never got behind him enough. He had that match with AJ at WrestleMania, which he lost and then turned heel. And it's never really worked for him on the main roster anyway. I mean, he could have been an ideal one for NXT, but Nakamura to SmackDown, yeah, get that, and we'll see what happens to him this year on SmackDown. Round 4 of the draft began with Raw reselecting Judgment Day. And now I had totally forgotten that they hadn't been drafted. And again, your world champion Damian Priest is in Judgment Day, and you're drafting him round 4, first pick. I don't think that makes sense at all. He would have been if you were Raw. Bearing in mind, they went through stages with Brock Lesnar as champion when, and a bit like Roman Reigns on SmackDown when he was champion. He never showed up for months, And at the moment, they didn't have a champion. So again, if you were SmackDown, you're picking Judgment Day early, right? Because you'd have got the world champion. Raw would have been screwed at that point. But Judgment Day down Raw, it is good though, because obviously Damian Priest is the champion. Dominic Mysterio has got Rey Mysterio on there now as well. And then we got Finn Balor, JD McDonough, and I'm guessing Rhea Ripley is going to be drafted as well, and she will be a part of the Judgment Day going forward. SmackDown reselected Naomi at this point in the 4th round. Yeah, she's only just come back. She come back. I always say that when you come back at Royal Rumbles, you're quite limited because they've already kind of got the plan for WrestleMania, and you can't really begin a meaningful feud because if you do start a feud at the Royal Rumble, you're eventually ending at WrestleMania anyway. So she's kind of been in that sticky situation. I would say that it's not the best for her to be in. So it makes a great sense for her to stay on SmackDown. She's already, I think she's got the title shot coming up at Backlash on Saturday against Bayley and Tiffany Stratton, I believe. So yeah, Naomi to SmackDown is a good pick. Raw now selected an NXT wrestler in Elijah Dragunov. This is really interesting now, and Ilya Dragunov has been NXT champion. He has been fantastic. He has done so much great stuff on NXT. I'm sure it's a big blow to have him leave NXT. But however, this makes massive options for him here. There is huge options for him on Raw. The biggest one that I can think of is Imperium have just kicked out Giovanni Vinci. Do they replace him with Elijah Dragon? Does he even go against Imperium? What are the plans? He is a fantastic competitor. And he's like a smaller version in a sense of Gunter. I think he was the one that even dethroned Gunter in NXT. And you're talking about going back a bit further, guys that could have beaten Gunter for the Intercontinental Championship. Dragunov could have been ideal for that. He really could have been, but they didn't. They've left him there. He's now on the Raw brand going forward. Interesting future for Elijah Dragunov. Looking forward to seeing what they do with him on the Raw brand. I personally think he could form part of the new Imperium. SmackDown at this point selected people from Raw: Chelsea Green and Piper Niven. Nick Aldis, what have you done? What have you done to yourself having Chelsea Green on your show going forward? Listen, good. Again, freshens up the women on the blue brand. You know, it takes them. You know, they've had a great run on Raw. They were tag team champions twice, and it does give that women's roster a fresher feel now on SmackDown as well. And there's two there that can quite easily compete for the gold, the single gold. They can go for tag gold. There's rumors of a women's intercontinental championship being debuted soon. Who knows? You know, some great opportunity there. Chelsea Green's actually on NXT next week going for the NXT championship. So again, you question that, and I'm not going to get into it already. But yeah, you question that. But Chelsea Green, Piper Niven on SmackDown going forward. Good move. Freshens up that women's division nicely. And we'll see what happens. We're moving on to one of the later picks now. Round 5, New Day on Raw. I don't really. They kind of. It's amazing they're still together. You know, normally in a WWE, you'd be split up, turned on each other, and probably got back together in the length of time that they've been together as a team. Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods. Yeah, I mean, they're not really doing a lot, are they? Could they have gone to SmackDown and maybe freshened it up a little bit in terms of the roster? Yes, they could have done, but they didn't. What's next for them? Could they go for tag team gold again? Are they going to go singly? Xavier Woods is in King of the Ring, I believe, and I think Gunter's going into King of the Ring as well. The Gunter wants to be King of the Ring. I think that's the favorite right there. Xavier Woods wants to retain his King of the Ring. So there you go. There's a little bit of a feud there, but we've kind of seen that before with Imperium and the New Day. But nevertheless, that's the choice in New Day to Raw. Another team that have been reselected by their retrospective brands was Pretty Deadly. Yeah, they had a good run. I mean, they went for the tag championships at Money in the Bank last year. They got injured. They've been out a while. They've just come back. So again, they were just finding their feet before it. So I think to keep them on SmackDown does make a lot of sense. Just because they're still relatively new still, you know, although they've been around for a while on the main roster. Because of their injury, it's kind of they've been away too long. So to keep them on fresh on SmackDown, it is a good pick. Now, another pick from NXT next. Raw selected Lyra Valkyria. That is a great pick. If I'm being totally transparent, that is being a great pick. Again, freshens up that women's division really, really nicely. And Valkyria was the NXT champion. She's done a lot of good work down there. And now it's time to freshen up the women's division with new faces, not just switching brands and freshen up new faces onto Raw. That being Lyra Valkyria. I am, for one, really looking forward to seeing what she can do on the main roster. And hopefully it's good and she becomes a really good established name in the women's division. We will see about that as we go along through the rest of the year, but a good pick there, I think, WWE in that sense. They made a good pick there. Now, another team that was switching brands, and this is another two women, so freshens up the SmackDown women's division very, very nicely. Candice LeRae, Indy Hartwell went over to SmackDown. That's a good move. That is a really good move. The SmackDown's women division is looking pretty strong now with the people that they've got in there. And yeah, I like this one. I think again, freshens up the faces on SmackDown. New people, new feuds. You know, they've kind of had one with Maxine Dupree, which isn't going to happen at the moment. But yeah, some really good ideas there for Candice and Indy. They could do some stuff on SmackDown. Could go for the champ tag titles. Could go singly and go for Bayley. There's options there. And again, freshens the faces on the brand, which is just as important as calling people up. It's freshening the faces on each brand. So that was a good pick. Raw, again, now they selected a team from SmackDown, the Final Testament. That is, of course, Authors of Pain, Karrion Kross, Scarlett, and of course, Paul Ellering. I don't know with this. Like, it's good that they freshened it up, but what are they going to do? They've been on NXT recently. They was on NXT. I think they Authors of Pain lost the match yesterday or today, so yeah, last night on NXT. So yeah, I'm not sure about what they're going to do with this. Karrion Kross has always been one that's had so much potential, but the WWE have never really got behind. I know Triple H was a really big fan of him. In NXT, he was great. The moment he moves up to the main roster is where it went south. And it's never really recovered. And it's the same kind of thing with Nakamura, you know, like you go to that main roster, and although Nakamura wasn't necessarily poorly used at the start, like we already mentioned, won the Royal Rumble, main event in WrestleMania, didn't win. He's just not been used to that potential. And I feel Karrion Kross is in the same boat here, which is a real shame. And the Final Testament, the Authors of Pain, you look at that on paper and you look at these three guys on paper and you're like, who stops them? Legitimately, who stops them? And no one's the answer. Unfortunately, what is stopping them is the people that run the show, so to speak. So Final Testament on Raw. Interesting. We'll see. Could they get more people? Could they pick another person to be in the Raw roster with them? Who knows? Another pick of people moving to SmackDown, and it kind of makes sense when I remembered earlier on, Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell went to SmackDown. Well, now DIY, Gargano and Ciampa have moved to SmackDown. And again, freshens up the faces on the brand. Two very good ring generals. I don't say ring generals, but they're very good in the ring. They're a great team. They're good singly. Fans don't get behind them though a lot. In NXT, the fans were all over these two. But the main roster, they don't get a response from the fans for whatever reason. But technically in the ring, they're great. They technically sound great competitors in the ring there. Will freshen up that roster quite nicely. And again, there's a team element to them. There's a single element to them. They've got some good wrestlers on SmackDown. But, you know, ultimately, for whatever reason, again, crowd not been invested in them for, well, again, whatever reason. And they're not really getting the brunt of the push from the office. So we'll see what happens with DIY. But again, a good move for SmackDown. New faces on the brand. I'm happy to see how they do. Raw selected Big Bronson Reed. Really surprised it took this long for Bronson Reed to get picked. He is a pick for me for a potential breakout of the year, Bronson Reed. I think he's great. I can't wait to see what he does on Raw. I'm hoping they get behind him, and I'm hoping he gets a really good chance at the Intercontinental title. I think he went, he was against Jey Uso, I think, this week. But really want him to get a title. I want him to get him the Intercontinental title, let him run with it. There's a lot of meat on Raw. Ivar, Strowman, Reed. There's a lot, you know, Authors of Pain, Karrion Kross. There's a lot of big guys on Raw. And, you know, there's a potential, some great matches with Bronson Reed. So I'm looking forward to seeing the Bronson Reed on Raw. Now, the last pick of the TV on Raw, so they did do a supplemental one afterwards, and we'll get into that in a minute, was a Blair Davenport from NXT goes to SmackDown. And again, I keep saying this, fresh faces, fresh look, fresh feel. Women's division gains another competitor from NXT. She's another great worker. You know, this could really work. SmackDown have really strengthened their women's side with fresh faces from Raw and up and comers from NXT. And I'm really excited for that division going forward. I really hope they put some effort into that because there is quality there on SmackDown, and Blair Davenport adds to that really, really nicely. So very good to end picks on the TV. Now, outside of that, Raw selected the new Catch Republic. So Pete Dunne, Tyler Bate, again, freshens up the faces. They reselected Caden Carter and Katana Chance, or Casey, as I call them. They also reselected Diamond Mine, the Creed Brothers, and Ivy Nile. And they called up Dijak from NXT. Now, Dijak, you can remember, was part of Retribution, which just sucked shit when it come up when they. It had the makings of something really good, but I think he was T-Bone or T-Bag or something rather. And then he was Dijakovic before that in NXT. He's really good. He's another big old boy that I think can really do something on Raw. If again, it's all about how they use it. But he's a good pick. New Catch Republic adds that fresh faceness to Raw. Creed Brothers have only just getting started. Ivy Niles only just getting started, and Katana Chance and Caden Carr are two women who have been on a periphery and they're just fallen off a cliff. So hopefully they can jump back on the cliff and get moving. SmackDown, they reselected Tegan Knox. I'm not sure what's happened to her recently, but again, another woman for the division. Fantastic women's division on SmackDown. They recalled up Apollo Crews from NXT. He's a man that's got everything, but has never really. I mean, he had that gimmick, the Nigerian gimmick or whatever it was, when he was a king or a prince or whatever done thing with. He had some muscle behind him. I can't remember the guy's name. But yeah, he was on there before, but he's another one that's got so much talent but has never been utilized. So Apollo Crews on SmackDown. Finally, Giovanni Vinci on SmackDown. I'm not sure how that's going to work if I'm being transparent. I don't see Vinci. He's a good worker, really good worker in the ring. But what do they do with him? Honestly, what do they do with Giovanni Vinci now on SmackDown? I really don't know. And you kind of think about that and you think it doesn't look good for him. Maybe he's another one that could perhaps end up going back to NXT for a bit and doing those little dual shows every now and again. Maybe NXT just gets free reign to choose who they want to come down because they certainly got left out in the draft. And if anything, they got opened up a little bit. So you would think that they'd be bringing people in. I was under the impression that NXT were going to get picks in this draft and they were going to get people moving from Raw and SmackDown down to NXT, which would have made perfect sense. Like Natalia was on NXT this week in an NXT Underground match. And why can't she stay down there? Why can't Natalia be the forefront of the women's division down there? Why couldn't they have selected a Giovanni Vinci or a Nakamura or an AJ Styles or people like that just to, build a brand around AJ Styles, Nakamura, and Natalia? They could have just got 3 picks, and those 3 picks could have been, or 4 if you counted Vinci, and they could have had basically a year's worth of feuds right there. But they didn't, and it was disappointing. That was, disappointing about. I think the draft itself was a bit of a lull this year. They did finally freshen things up. They brought up some new faces. The brands have got some new faces, which is nice. I'm just disappointed they left NXT out because I think something could have been done there on the NXT brand, but unfortunately they left it out. But nevertheless, rosters are set. They lock after Backlash on Saturday. As of next week, Raw and SmackDown have new looks. We'll look forward to seeing that. We'll look forward to reviewing that and so much more on the channel coming up. Keep it locked to all our social medias. And until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.